welcome you to the 59th lecture of NPTEL online certification course Drilling and Blasting Technology. We are almost at the verge of ending the course. This is the last before lecture. So, most of the part of this lecture is also prepared by Dr. Satyabrata Behera. In this lecture and in the next lecture, we will cover the safety procedures, how we can ensure the safety in this drilling and blasting process. So, as we do in every lecture, first let us retrospect so far what we have covered. So far we have covered the basics of drilling and blasting technologies, the explosive their properties and the explosive rock interactions, and how to design a surface bench blasting process, how to design an underground blasting process where only single free phase is available, that is also discussed. We have discussed what are the expected results we basically expect from the blasting process, say like fragmentation, then controlling of the fly rocks, controlling of the ground vibrations, noises, that heap formations, how those are considered, that is also discussed in the previous lectures. We have also discussed the role of rock and rock properties on the performance of the drilling and blasting. We have already calculated how to the performance can be estimated from the drilling and blasting process, that is also calculated, those numericals are solved. We have solved the financial implications of the drilling and blasting process, that what could be the possible drilling cost, what could be the possible blasting cost, and we have covered some of the special blasting techniques like boulder blasting, underwater blasting, ring blasting, those are covered, as well as we have covered some safety some environmental features also which are associated with the drilling blasting process. In this lecture, we would like to learn how we can ensure the complete safety in the drilling and blasting process. Actually, we have mainly focused on the blasting process because drilling is as similar as the other mechanical operations, machine operations, but these two lectures, this lecture and next lecture, is basically aimed to give you the idea about how the safety can be ensured during the blasting process, because blasting is basically the detonation of explosive energy, and explosive is basically a huge chemical energy which is suddenly released in forms of shock and heat, and a small quantity of explosive can take the life of hundreds and thousands. So, that is why this is very dangerous thing, dangerous chemical, and a proper safety has to be ensured in this process. So, that is the requirement. So, our objective is to understand what is SOP, means standard operating procedure, why standard operating procedure is important in the blasting, how to write the standard operating procedure for its approval to the apex bodies, and how that will be displayed for the common people. Say for apex bodies you are sending a note, but that cannot be the display one. Display has to be such attractive, it should be visual enough, that graphics must be there, so that anyone is looking at that, reading at that, visualizing that, can understand what to do. It is basically the visual presentation. And what are the components of the SOP, those has to be given in this particular lecture. So, first let us understand, generally we describe it in two terms, one is standard operating procedure, another is safe working principles. Actually both the terms looks very similar, but there are little bit differences in this. Standard operating procedure provides the policies, processes and standards needed for the organization to succeed, that is for a particular job, what is the standard operating procedure to be laid out, so that following that the accidents can be avoided. Safe working principles are similar to SOP, but developed and used for ensuring the safe process, systems and behavior. Basically, this will deals with the principles. So, it will be very clear to you if I guide you with one example. Suppose the person who is doing some electrical work in your house or so, the safe working principle for him is that do not catch the wire using your wet hand. Okay. That means, if the water are there in your hand, if you catch that one, you may be electrocuted. So, it has to be avoided, so that one person should not that. So, that is the principle. Principally, you should not catch the live wire with the wet hand. Okay. So, that is the principle, but in operating procedure, the person what he has to do in step by step, that has to be described. That means, it will be asked for the electrician, okay, you come first dry your hand, that is the step 1, dry your hand. Step 2, enter in the place where you have to work. Third is that wear your safety shoes, use the gloves. So, like that way, these are the step by step process that has to be discussed, is basically the standard operating procedure, step 1 to step 2 or step 3, that has to be followed here. So, this is the basic difference, but both are look similar and both are basically created for the proper knowledge of the workers and to execute the operation with the safety. So, the standard operating procedure provides the policies, they can benefit a business, reduce the error and increase the efficiencies, profitability, and you always understand one accident is lead to not only the financial or manpower loss, it also lead to huge time loss, huge legal burden, huge procedural burdens on the same. Means once accident occurs, the person may die, the machine may damage, there may be other financial losses like chemical burning, etc. Those things happen, as well as after that the reorganizing that area, that takes time, that take cost. The regular legal process on the settling of the matter takes time, takes financial burden. So, all these are not only that inspection, etc., that hampers the regular operations in that particular organization. So, there are many problems. In one accident, you are basically welcoming a huge burdens, huge troubles on your organization. So, that is why whichever the minor one or small one is there, all the accidents must be avoided, and that is why the standard operating procedures are made. So, in workplace for different operations, different SOPs has to be made. SOPs are depending on the type of operation, operating procedures, have available machineries, all these are considered. It has to be made which should be easy to understand by the workers, they can easily follow that one, and it must be displayed in the very good way as I was discussing, and it must be expressed in such a way using graffiti, etc., so that anyone looking at that, he can understand how that thing has to be carried out, and it has to be made in the local languages which people can understand on that area, depending on the education level of that one. You can easily understand, say this, say colorful books are given to the children, so that they become attractive to that, but colorful books are not given to the engineering students, because they are already accustomed with that system, they understand what they need to do. So, this SOP, SWP, this has to be made attractive to the lower level workers, so that they can easily understand and they love to follow that one. And there may be other incentive etc., to be given for the SOP followers. So, these are some of the pictures showed here in a in an iron ore mines in India. These are there, we have taken the photographs of those mines are displayed here. So, the mine is in Orissa, and so that is why all the SOP, SWP are given in Oriya, in Hindi and in English also. So, these are displayed in every area in the entrance canteen, so that in the leisure time also they can see this. And the how to write this standard operating procedures are very, very important. It must be expressed in such a way that it should be clear to the reader who is reading it or who is visualizing it, as well as it must be deliver only one message. There should not be multiple messages should be given in one instructions or one code, a standard operating code. It must not be there. So, it must be a single one. That means you have to wear gloves, means you have to wear gloves. It is not that you have to wear gloves, you have to wear goggles, you have to put on your shoes, not like that. So, one instructions must be given one in one sentence. The manual should be brief, so that easily one can understand. Actually, there are two aspects of the SOP. One is for displaying for the workers, another is for the the documentation kept to be kept in the mine, to be given to the apex bodies. So, that documentation may be looking a different way. There must be a title or so, but for the workers which is displayed, there may be graffitis are used, maybe simple instructive languages should be utilized. And once the SOP is prepared, it has to be evaluated each and every time. That means, whether there are any mistakes there or not, or any in between instructions are missed or not. So, that has to be evaluated, re-evaluated all the times, maybe in 6 months, maybe in periodically, that has to be carried out, and it must be carried out for each and every near missing accident. If any near accidents are missed, say there are many near missing accident occurs prior to one accident. So, it is not that first time it occurs and accident carried out. In general, it is the in any organization, generally they neglect the near missing accidents, but near missing accidents are very, very important, because they are having the potential to become accident, but because of the probability those are missed. So, that is why these things are very, very important, and for each near missing accident the SOP must be re-evaluated. So, for writing SOPs, the author should perform the risk assessment, all the steps and the procedures to determine any obstacles and may arise during this process. They must consider those things. So, the step by step processes and what are the likely chances of the risk in each process, that must be evaluated. It is similar to a chess, where the basically the player is thinking of the all the options possible for that particular move. So, here also for each step, what are the possible risk out of that step must be considered. Then there procedural steps to avoid those risks has to be considered, and considering that the SOP has to be made. So, basically the key questions are: who are performing the role, what does each role do, what is the goal of the outcome of each person's role, and has what needs to happen been explained clearly. So, these are very, very important, must be understood. This code of practice should be related to a particular operation or procedure, that must aim to the zero accident plan, and it must be displayed in terms of do's and don'ts, or always and never. It may not be, sometimes you can do, you may not do, or you can do, you cannot do, like that. Those confusing statement is not allowed in this type of documents. Thus SOP, SWP, code of practice, all these must be followed with the points. It must be specific one, do's or don't, always do this or never do this. Okay. So, these are the different steps that define the task or goal, why it need an SOP. So, first is that you have to write the SOP. The task must be defined. There should not be any confusion about the task, what has to be done, and after this task what the goal has to be achieved, that must be clear while the SOPs are made. The format of SOP is very important, because often our workers are changing their jobs. So, if the formats are different, it will be very difficult for them to move from one format to another format, and many of the time they may forget those things. So, that is why format must be identical across the jobs. So, that is very important. The next step is to determine the dependencies, what are the requirement on that particular process, what is the possible risk when the task is being recorded, that relies on the other procedures within that organizations or not. So, that is very important, that suppose say one drilling helper who is putting that drill rod holder. So, it must be ensured that while the drilling helper is putting that drill rod holder, that time drill operator must put his mast on the rest condition, so that that will not struck on the drill helper. So, this sequencing, because this coordination is very important, and ensuring the safety, complete safety. So, it is not that by mistake drill operator will operate the drill machine when the helper is holding the drill rod. So, that should not be there, and that must be taken care of by the drill operator. So, these are very important one. This is I think Behera will explain you.
You can see here how the SOPs are written at various locations, like on the side of his wall, like some banners, and it has been written in Hindi language as well as in the Odia language as well as in the English language, for better understanding of the people who are working there, the people who are working there, and also the people who are associated with that area. Maybe some people who were not working on that particular field maybe come to that area for some work, like some people who work with the cattle. So the SOP should be formulated likewise, that it should help the people who are working as well as the people who were associated in the nearby area. They should understand properly. Our SOP should be formulated likewise, because there is a saying called ignorance has no excuse. That means if a small child will touch one live electrical wire and it will say, I don't know that the wire is live, the electricity will not excuse that person. So SOP should be likewise, that the persons who are working, that should be safe for that person also, and those who are not working but they are associated to that work, they will also safe to that work. So now let's see what are the components of an SOP. The standard operation procedure should include. So how we are going to document our SOP. So first one is the title page, then the table of contents. The title page will see list of titles of the procedure for whom it is intended. For example, if it is intended for the dumper operators, so our SOP will be likewise, and if that SOP is for the blasting operation, so our SOP will be likewise. So the specific rule, department, team and agencies. Its SOP identification number and the names and signature of the people who prepared and approved the manual. So who are the responsible person, their name and signature also be there in the title page, and the table of contents to provide the easy access to various sections in the large SOP. Now, a step-by-step list of the procedure that includes explanation of the task, goal and responsibility, regulatory requirements, terminology, descriptions of what needs to be done to complete each step, and a discussion of decisions that must be made. This section will make most part of the SOP, like the step-by-step procedures. Like we are doing, let us suppose I am taking one example. One dumper operator is going to start its dumper for the operation. So what will be the basic procedure? First of all, like we are driving our car. So for the first thing, we need to see whether the tire is in a proper conditions or not. That is our first check. If we are having a flat tire and we are going to start our car, so that is the wrong procedure. So the step-by-step procedure, we have to check the tire condition, then we will check our whether all the hydraulics are working properly or not, whether diesel is there or not. So the step-by-step procedure we have to check before starting any operations. So that procedure is written in that SOP. The next one is the scope. This covers the scope. Now we'll discuss the blasting procedure, SOP for the blasting procedure. So in the scope section, this covers the scope for blasting in mines. So now, who are the responsible person? The first one is the blasting in charge, then the foreman and the blaster and the blasting helper. These three persons will be the responsible person for that SOP.
So, while these personals are basically engaged for that, their first requirement is to understand whether they are competent for that particular job or not. Say like the knowledge and the experience, training, physical ability and evidence of competency. Say that means the blasting in charge should be a mining engineer or so. The person who is carrying out the blaster must be properly trained and having the blaster certificate, certified blaster, then only he will be allowed to operate the exploder, otherwise it cannot be. So, the exploder key, on no occasion a blaster can hand over to a blasting helper, that cannot be possible, and those things are the procedural steps that has to be followed out. But this physical ability is physical ability, I put this only word, but I believe that it is not only physical ability, it is physical and mental ability. On that particular day, the mental conditions of the person is also very important, that must be taken care of. Say person is having some troublesome condition, maybe because of the family problem or maybe because of the health problem. Anyway, he should not attend this type of job on which his performance may lead the unsafe condition for the others. So, that is why this is very important, and that evidence of competency must be considered for a new operators or new persons entering into the mine. So, the first process which is required in a explosive and blasting process is the storage of explosive. Explosive must be stored in the designated area which is called magazine. No explosive is allowed to be stored for any other place other than it is designated by laws of the country, and as it is designated in that particular place, it must be that designated place is constructed following the guideline of that. So, as it is the required, the separate casings are required for placing the explosive detonators. They cannot be taken together, they cannot be travelled together. There must be proper barricading, there must be proper safety arrangements, there must be the lightning arresters. All these are the essential requirement to keep the explosive storing, and when the explosive is being stored, the procedural steps SOP made, that has to be followed properly, and the explosive taken out, that procedural steps must be followed. Similarly, the next requirement is the issue of explosive from the storage place, bring that to the mine, and for that the explosive transportation has to be carried out. Here the as per the explosive rule, what are the procedures that has to be made properly. First is the route plan, then what are the speeds, what are the speed limits, how the carrying transportation system would be properly marked, that explosive sign must be there. There must be separate containers for the explosives and the detonators. The security has to be provided properly, so that no one can snatch that from the explosive van. The travel program must be followed properly. The traffic has to be considered for that particular condition. That area must be restricted on radio device. Plant to magazine condition must be considered, and if it is in the case of underground, the underground reserve station has to be properly constructed, properly maintained, and what are the essential safety requirements that has to be followed. The next is the charging part. This charging is very, very important, because in charging, where the charging is carried out, the manpowers are there and huge manpowers are there, and the charging has to be properly carried out. So, the first requirement is that the place where the charging is being carried out, first that has to be isolated. No other person than the authorized person, like blasting helper, blasting in charges, other than these people, no other persons are allowed to be in that particular area or the vicinity, in the vicinity of that charging area. That must be properly marked, so that no one can violate that one. No operations in that place are allowed. The explosives are to be loaded on the hole where the hole has to be fired. It should not be placed to the empty hole or abandoned hole. Many occasions the drill machines drill hole, but it cannot reach the depth. So, they abandon that hole and do carry out drilling in a nearby place to that. So, that has to be properly identified, and no explosive has to be placed in the abandoned holes. And prior to blasting, the depth of all the hole must be measured to check whether it is reached up to the bottom of the bench or it is not sufficient length. And while the charging, means the moment explosive is reached in the charging place, that time onward no other electronic devices are allowed. Basically, all the switch off currently, which is very much required, is that our mobile phone, which generate huge electromagnetic flux around that mobile phone, and that may lead to the immature explosion of the explosive. So, to avoid that one, all the electronics devices must be switched off in the place where the charging is being carried out. So, next process is that after charging you have to connecting the holes and you have to carry out the blasting. So, before this blasting has to be carried out, you have to evacuate a sufficient area so that no one should be there. So, the signaling system, siren, flagman, security, evacuation, all this must be carried out prior to the blast. And it is very, very important that not only the human being, but also the cattle, stray dogs, etc., are also not allowed to violate this evacuated area and enter into the mining area. So, that is why the proper barricading must be carried out in and around the blasting zone, so that no one can enter into that place. Connections of the boreholes prior to the blasting must be checked whether it is properly connected, so that all the blast holes have significant free face prior to the blasting or not. Then the any other electrical sources in and around is there or not, that has to be properly checked, so that after connecting immature blasting should not be there. So, before, that is why if in an underground mines etc., where a number of electrical detonators are used, all the electrical detonators must be checked for its continuity prior to bringing that to the underground. And for that, the detonators, each and every detonator has to be taken in a isolated place, and only the blaster is allowed to test that using a ohm meter, so that it should not be blasted, or if immaturely, if it is a faulty one, it may blast in, say, in ohm meter we provide less than 1 ampere current, so that the detonator will not blast, detonator will blast at 1.3 or 1.5 ampere current. So, but there may be a faulty detonator that may blast in less than 1 ampere current also. So, considering that, with a sufficient distance cover, the ohm meter is placed and the blaster is placed himself, and he checked that electrical detonator whether it is okay or not, and it measures its resistance. So, prior to bringing that into the site, he personally checked those detonators, then they bring that one. Similarly, that connectivity also ensures that the lead wire connections etc. Proper resistance has to be checked whether it is there or not, otherwise in a series circuit when it is made, exploder cannot explode that. So, if the resistance will become high, so considering that, exploder's capacity has to be considered, the total resistance has to be considered using the ohm meter, then if it is applicable, then only the blasting has to be carried out, otherwise the other type of arrangement system, maybe you may switch to series to parallel connections, those can be considered. So, only the blaster shall connect the lead wires to the machine, only the blaster is allowed to test the circuit using the galvanometer, only the blaster is allowed to fire the shot, and after the blasting the lead wire has to be disconnected immediately. Here a cross check is also there, you can see the green button in the photo of the exploder, that is start right button. This is a special type of switch which is used in the exploder, because if someone is keep on pushing this switch, once it is giving current for a few milliseconds, it will stop by itself, it will not be continuing the current in that particular direction. So, this is that type of switch which just gives the current for a particular moment, not for a long time. That is why continuous flow of current is not possible in this case. So, this is very very important safety features added to the exploder. So, this now let us understand through a video how the procedural steps are carried out in a blasting. So, Dr. Behera will explain this.
The first procedure in the blasting operation, like the blaster has to count the number of holes for blasting, and he has to estimate the amount of explosives which will be required for carrying out the blasting. As for the amount requirement, the blaster will prepare one indent to bring that amount of explosive to that blast area after the approval of the mines manager. So, now let us see how the blaster and along with the blasting in charge are inspecting the blasting site, and how they are counting the holes and estimating the quantity of explosives which will be required for blasting. Then by taking the mines manager's approval, they will indent that amount of explosive, that quantity of explosive for blasting. This is one short video. Here the blaster and the persons related to the blasting thing, they are measuring the depth of the hole one by one. The planned depth was 10 meter. However, due to some type of mistake, not properly flushing the hole, sometimes the final depth was not about 10 meters, that may be 9.5, that may be 8 meters. So the blaster has to check each and every hole, the depth of the hole, and accordingly they will estimate the quantity of explosive which will be required for blasting. The next procedure we'll discuss in the upcoming lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.